A raise? You should be grateful we even keep you. Julian Croft laughed, his voice bouncing off the glass walls of the executive boardroom. I sat perfectly still, looking at the quarterly performance review folder on the mahogany table in front of me. I had 7 years of exceptional evaluations. 7 years without a single adjustment to my base pay. Your request is rather ambitious considering current market conditions, Edward. Evelyn Miller, the chief financial officer, tilted her head with a look of practiced sympathy. The rest of the leadership team exchanged knowing glances around the table. There were 8 people in that room making decisions about my worth, yet none of them had any idea what my job actually entailed. I developed the calibration system that increased our machine precision by 37%, I said, keeping my voice calm and measured. I cut production time in half and personally trained 16 of our junior technicians. The Eastbrook Aerospace contract, which brings in millions every year, only exists because our hardware met their strict technical specifications. That was a team effort. Donald Croft, the vice president of sales and the CEO's son, interrupted. He drummed his fingers on the table, looking bored. Everyone pulls their weight here. Industry standards are for average employees, Edward. If you want extraordinary compensation, you need to deliver extraordinary results. My chest tightened, but I kept my composure. The calibration rig I had pioneered had generated millions of dollars in additional revenue. Last quarter's internal report showed a 28% profit spike directly tied to my proprietary innovations. I slid the market salary data across the table. Engineers with my qualifications and output are paid at least 30% higher than my current rate. My salary has not changed since I was hired 7 years ago. Julian did not even look at the documents. He pushed them back toward me. I stood up, pulled a sealed white envelope from my jacket, and placed it in the center of the table. "Thank you for your time," I said. I turned and walked out of the room, shutting the door quietly behind me. They did not open that envelope for 3 days. When they finally did, the panic calls started flooding my phone. My name is Edward Vance. I am 58 years old, and until 3 weeks ago, I was the lead calibration engineer at Midwest Manufacturing Specialists. They called me a technical specialist on paper, a title designed to keep my salary low, while my responsibilities expanded every single year. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, taking apart old radios and lawnmowers in my father's workshop. By the time I was 12, I could rebuild an engine. By 16, I was calibrating machine shop lathes for local businesses. My college professors called me Precision Edward, and that obsession with exact numbers followed me throughout my career. When I joined Midwest 7 years ago, I thought it was a great opportunity. The company manufactured high-precision testing equipment for aerospace and medical firms. My starting salary was reasonable at the time, and they promised regular reviews and adjustments. The calibration breakthrough happened during my second year. I noticed tiny variations in our testing rigs, small errors that everyone else dismissed as acceptable drift. But in our industry, those tiny errors are the difference between a successful launch and a catastrophic failure. I spent my weekends and evenings building alternative calibration models, using my own money to buy sensors and logic boards. The breakthrough came at 3 in the morning on a rainy Tuesday. I designed a hybrid digital-mechanical calibration rig that merged mechanical alignment with real-time digital sensor feedback. The results were instant. Calibration time dropped from 6 hours to under 3, and accuracy improved to levels our competitors could not match. The production floor implemented my rig immediately. Quality complaints fell to 0, and clients started signing long-term service contracts. I waited for a promotion or a bonus. Instead, at the next corporate meeting, Julian Croft presented my design as the company's new proprietary calibration system. There was no mention of my name. Julian took all the credit while I sat in the back row. My colleague George told me to be patient and that recognition would come. So, I was patient. I documented every single procedure. I answered client emergency calls at midnight. I worked through major holidays. When the company expanded into the European market, their initial shipments failed regulatory compliance. Julian told me to fix it, or they would find someone who could. I canceled our anniversary trip, and my wife Clara had to attend her brother's retirement party alone. For 6 weeks, I worked 18-hour days, redesigning the sensor arrays to comply with European safety codes. The machines passed inspection on the next try. The company celebrated with a massive banquet, but I was not invited because I was on a support call with technicians in Munich. Every year, my performance reviews were flawless. Every year, my salary remained exactly the same. I watched young guys with zero experience negotiate starting salaries higher than mine. HR told me they could not adjust my pay because it would disrupt internal equity. I stopped arguing. I began looking elsewhere. Because of my work, my name had circulated among industry regulators. I turned down several offers out of a foolish sense of loyalty to my team. Then I received an email from Sophia Abbott, the director of the Industrial Certification Authority, or ICA. The ECA is the governing body that certifies precision standards for every manufacturer in our sector. Their stamp of approval is what keeps companies in business. Sophia offered me the position of Chief Innovation Officer. The compensation package was more than double what I made at Midwest, and I would have the authority to update industry standards. I met Sophia for dinner, and we spent hours discussing how to modernize certification protocols. I agreed to take the job but requested 2 weeks to transition my work at Midwest properly. I decided to give Julian Croft one final opportunity to treat me fairly. I prepared a detailed folder of my work, including cost savings and revenue generated by my designs, and requested a moderate raise. I wanted to see if they valued my contributions. They did not. They laughed and told me to be grateful. As I walked back to my desk after that review, the last bit of loyalty I felt toward Midwest vanished. I sent Sophia an email accepting her offer, drafted my resignation letter, and placed it in the white envelope. The next morning, I delivered it directly to the boardroom. I spent the next 3 days wrapping up my tasks, documenting every calibration sequence, and showing the junior techs how to run the software. On the third afternoon, my phone started buzzing. I had 6 missed calls from HR, 5 from Julian Croft, and 3 from Evelyn Miller. I turned my phone off and finished my work. The reckoning was finally starting. When I turned my phone back on, a message from the HR director, Heather, asked me to come to the main conference room immediately. When I walked in, Julian, Donald, and Evelyn were already seated. The white envelope I had left on the table was open, and my resignation letter was sitting in front of Julian. His face was flushed. "Edward, what is the meaning of this?" Julian demanded, pointing at the letter. "It is my 2-week notice," I said. "I have accepted a position at another organization." "But we were just negotiating," Evelyn said, her voice completely different from the dismissive tone she had used during my review. "We value your contributions here, Edward. The company is going through some transitions, and we may have been a bit too focused on budget constraints during your review." Donald nodded, though he looked irritated. "We can talk about adjustments. We are prepared to offer you a 30% raise right now, retroactively applied to the start of this year." I looked at Julian and then at Evelyn. 7 years of ignored requests, of working late, of watching other engineers get paid more for doing less, and suddenly they found the budget for a 30% raise within 3 days of my resignation letter. "Thank you, but I have already accepted the other offer," I said. "We can make it 50%, Julian intervened, leaning forward, "and we will give you the title of Director of Calibration Services, with 3 junior engineers reporting to you directly. You will also get a seat on the Technical Innovation Committee." This was the same committee that had rejected my equipment upgrade proposals for the last 3 years, calling them unnecessary expenses. I looked at the people who had spent years exploiting my skills while refusing to compensate me fairly. They did not value me now. They were just terrified of what would happen to their production lines without me. "My decision is final," I said. "I will spend the next 2 weeks completing my current projects and documenting all my calibration procedures so the transition is smooth." Julian stood up, his desperation turning into anger. "You are being unprofessional, Edward. You cannot just leave us in the middle of the Eastbrook project." "I am giving you 2 weeks of notice, which is standard," I replied. "I have already compiled the necessary calibration logs for Eastbrook. The junior technicians know how to execute the daily runs." I walked out of the room, leaving them to argue among themselves. The next 2 weeks were incredibly strange. Managers who had not spoken to me in years stopped by my desk to ask if I wanted to grab lunch. Donald Croft kept sending me emails, asking for private meetings to discuss consulting opportunities after my departure. I declined them all. I spent my remaining days writing detailed, step-by-step guides for every machine on the floor. I did not want the technicians to suffer because of the leadership's greed. I created training documents, recorded calibration sequences on video, and organized all my digital files on the company network. On my last day, I handed over my keys and security badge to HR. Julian met me in the lobby as I was leaving. "This is a mistake, Edward," he said, crossing his arms. "You are throwing away 7 years of history here. You will not find another company that understands your methods like we do. At least tell us where you are going." I stopped at the glass exit doors and looked at him. "I am joining the Industrial Certification Authority as Chief Innovation Officer," I said. "I start in 3 weeks." Julian's face went completely pale. He knew exactly what the ICA was. Every machine Midwest manufactured had to pass ICA testing before it could be shipped to clients. If the ICA flagged a quality issue, our production line would stop, and our contracts would be terminated. The Chief Innovation Officer position was one of the most influential roles in the entire regulatory framework. Julian opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out. I smiled, nodded to the security guard, and walked out into the sunshine. For the first time in 7 years, I did not feel the constant weight of Midwest Productions' schedules on my shoulders. I spent the next 3 weeks on vacation with my wife, Clara. We drove up to northern Michigan, rented a cabin near the lake, and spent our days hiking and fishing. I left my work phone off. I noticed 18 missed calls from Julian and Donald on my personal device, but I did not return any of them. Clara remarked that she had not seen me this relaxed since before we were married. I realized how much of my life I had sacrificed for a company that viewed me as a disposable resource. That realization only strengthened my resolve. When my vacation ended, I walked into the ICA headquarters in Chicago. Sophia Abbott welcomed me and showed me to my office. It was a spacious room with actual windows overlooking the city, a massive upgrade from the windowless cubicle I had occupied at Midwest for 7 years. "Your reputation precedes you, Edward," Sophia said as she handed me the current regulatory files. "The calibration standards we use have not been updated in 10 years. The industry has moved forward, but our testing protocols are stuck in the past. Some manufacturers are using outdated equipment and ignoring sensor drift, which leads to safety issues. I want you to lead the modernization project." I spent my first month analyzing our certification data and reviewing the existing rules. I realized that many companies, including Midwest, were exploiting loopholes in the old standards. They were extending their calibration intervals from 3 months to 12 months to save money on maintenance, even though their sensors were losing accuracy after 4 months. This practice allowed them to boost their short-term profits while risking the quality of their machines. I drafted a new set of standards that required real-time calibration monitoring and established strict 3-month testing intervals for all precision manufacturing equipment. These changes would force every manufacturer in the industry to upgrade their technology and maintain high-quality controls. It was a massive project, but I had the technical expertise to make it watertight. I was determined to bring accountability back to the industry. The drafting process for the new certification standards took 3 months of intense work. I collaborated with metallurgical experts, software developers, and safety engineers to ensure the new rules were scientifically sound and practically achievable. We held public review sessions where industry representatives could submit feedback. Throughout this process, I maintained strict professional ethics. I did not target Midwest manufacturing specifically, nor did I write rules that only they would fail. The new standards simply reflected the level of precision that modern technology allowed, the exact level of precision that I had personally delivered at Midwest for years. The final draft, known as ICA Standard 409, was approved by the board and scheduled for implementation. When the updated standards were officially published, the reaction from the manufacturing sector was immediate. While advanced companies welcomed the clarity, those who had been cutting corners began to panic. My work phone rang early the next morning. It was George, my former colleague at Midwest. "Edward, have you seen the new ICA standards?" he asked. his voice tense. "They are saying we have to calibrate our machines every 90 days and use digital drift tracking. That is going to cost us hundreds of thousands of dollars in equipment upgrades. It is impossible for us to meet these guidelines by next month." "It is not impossible, George," I replied calmly. "I proposed these exact calibration intervals to Julian 3 years ago. We even ran tests showing that our accuracy dropped after 100 days of continuous operation. Julian rejected the proposal because he wanted to keep our maintenance budget low to show higher profit margins. The standards are now industry law." George sighed. "Our certification renewal is due in 4 weeks, Edward. If we fail, we cannot ship any new orders under the Eastbrook contract. We are nowhere near ready." "The ICA offers transition consulting services," I said, maintaining my official role. "I can send you the contact information for our compliance department." George declined, saying Julian was already looking for external consultants to find a loophole. A week later, Midwest Manufacturing submitted an application for an expedited pre-assessment review. This was a service where our inspectors would visit a factory early to identify compliance issues before the official audit. I did not involve myself in their application, letting the scheduling department handle it. The audit was assigned to an independent inspector named Arthur Hale. 2 weeks later, Arthur's report landed on my desk with a red flag warning. Midwest testing rigs had failed to meet the new precision requirements by a margin of 42%. Their calibration software was 5 years out of date, and their manual logs showed that they had skipped several mandatory maintenance runs. The inspector noted that their machines had significant drift issues that would affect the structural integrity of their aerospace components. I approved the report and forwarded the recommendations to Midwest, giving them 30 days to correct the violations. The next morning, Julian Croft bypassed the official compliance channels and called my direct line. "Edward, what is the meaning of this inspector's report?" Julian shouted. "The new standards are clearly designed to target our business. You are using your new position at the ICA to punish us for refusing your raise. This is a personal vendetta, and we are not going to stand for it." I remained silent for a moment to let his anger dissipate. "Julian," I said, keeping my voice cold and even, "as per IC policy, all calls on this line regarding certification audits are recorded for federal oversight. Would you like to repeat your allegations for the official record?" Silence fell over the line. I could hear Julian's heavy breathing before he hung up the phone. Midwest's official certification audit came due while I was in Denver, attending a national aerospace safety conference. The ICA committee reviewed their application without my presence, following the standard regulatory procedures. The findings were clear. Midwest was denied full certification. The committee granted them a provisional certification, which allowed them to continue operations but placed strict limitations on their business. Under provisional status, they could not sign new contracts, and they were legally required to notify all existing clients of their non-compliant status. For a company like Midwest, which relied on its reputation for precision, this was a devastating blow. Within 24 hours of the announcement, I received a dozen emails from their board members and executives asking for emergency meetings. I forwarded all of them to the ICA legal team, maintaining strict boundaries. At the annual industry summit in Chicago a month later, Midwest's leadership team was in attendance. I was delivering the keynote address on precision stand and the future of regulatory compliance. As I stood on the stage, looking out at the audience, I saw Julian Croft, Donald Croft, and Evelyn Miller sitting in the second row. They were taking notes with an intensity I had never seen from them before. During the networking reception after the presentations, Donald Croft approached me. He held a glass of mineral water and looked significantly older than he had 6 months ago. The stress of the provisional certification was visible on his face. "Edward, that was an impressive speech," Donald said, attempting to sound friendly. "We have hired 3 new quality specialists to help us transition to the new standards, but we are struggling with the drift calibration algorithms. The documentation you left behind does not seem to cover the new requirements." The documentation I provided was complete. "For the systems we used at the time," I replied. "The new standards require real-time tracking, which requires different algorithms." I understand you pioneered those algorithms, Donald said, lowering his voice. Look, Julian wants to meet with you privately. We are prepared to offer you a very lucrative consulting contract to help us resolve these calibration issues. ICA officers are strictly prohibited from private consulting with firms we regulate, I said. That would be a direct conflict of interest. We can set up a corporate structure to bypass that, Donald pressed. We can make it worth your while, Edward. I looked him in the eyes. That would be illegal, Donald, and this conversation is now over. I walked away, leaving him standing alone. But the pressure on Midwest was mounting, and they were about to make a move that would trigger their own downfall. 2 weeks after the industry summit, Midwest Manufacturing filed a formal complaint with the ICA's Ethics Board and the Federal Oversight Commission. They alleged that I had manipulated the regulatory process to target their business. They claimed I was using my position to seek personal revenge for a salary dispute, and they accused me of stealing proprietary information and sabotaging their internal calibration documents before I resigned. It was a serious attack, designed to get me fired and delay the enforcement of the new standards. Sophia Abbott called me into her office to discuss the complaint. We have to take this seriously, Edward, she said. The board has initiated Protocol 37, which is our standard comprehensive audit of all files related to the development of the new standards. We will review every email, every draft, and every meeting log. I am not concerned, I replied. I have kept detailed records of everything. I recused myself from the investigation to maintain transparency and hired my own attorney, Gerald Finch, to protect my personal interests. Gerald was a seasoned intellectual property lawyer who understood the corporate games companies played. As we went through my personal files and the documents Midwest had submitted, Gerald noticed something interesting. When I had developed the hybrid calibration rig during my second year, Midwest had filed a patent for it. I was listed as the primary inventor, but the patent, number 10,845,612, was registered under Midwest Manufacturing Specialists as the assignee. I had never signed an assignment agreement. I remembered Julian Croft telling me at the time that the company automatically owned all employee inventions, and I had assumed they had the legal right to it. Gerald requested a copy of the official patent assignment documents from the United States Patent and Trademark Office. When the files arrived, we examined the signature page. In the center of the document was my name, Edward Vance, signed in blue ink, dated 5 years ago. The only problem was, I had never seen that document in my life. The signature was a clever imitation, but it was not mine. On that exact date, I was in Cleveland, calibrating equipment for a client, and I had hotel and travel receipts to prove it. Julian Croft and Donald Croft had also listed themselves as co-inventors on the patent application, despite having zero technical knowledge. Gerald explained the legal reality of the situation. Under U.S. patent law, a patent belongs to the individual inventor unless a valid assignment contract transfers those rights. Because the signature on the assignment document was forged, a violation of California Penal Code, Section 470 and federal fraud statutes, the contract was void ab initio. This meant the assignment was legally invalid from the very beginning and had never actually occurred. Therefore, Midwest Manufacturing did not own the patent. I did. I was the sole legal owner of the calibration technology that ran their entire factory. Under 35 U.S.C. Section 271, anyone who makes, uses, or sells a patent-owned invention without the owner's permission is committing patent infringement. Since Midwest was using my patented calibration system to manufacture and test their machines, they were in direct violation of federal law. To make matters worse, since they were selling these machines to clients like Eastbrook Aerospace, those clients were also technically using infringing technology, exposing them to massive legal liabilities. "This is the hammer, Edward," Gerald said, tapping the patent documents. "They tried to destroy your career with an ethics complaint, but they just handed us the evidence of their own fraud. We are going to file a patent infringement lawsuit in federal court and send cease and desist letters to all their major clients." The next week, Gerald filed the lawsuit in the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of Illinois. We demanded an immediate injunction to stop Midwest from using the patented calibration rig, as well as damages for past infringement. At the same time, We sent formal notices to Eastbrook Aerospace and 4 other major clients of Midwest. The letters informed them that the equipment they had purchased from Midwest utilized proprietary calibration technology owned exclusively by Edward Vance, and that Midwest had no legal license to distribute it. The reaction was a corporate earthquake. Eastbrook Aerospace immediately suspended their contract with Midwest. They could not risk being named in a patent infringement lawsuit, especially for defense contracts. Midwest's stock price plummeted by 45% in a single day as investors realized their primary product line was legally frozen. The board of directors at Midwest, who had previously supported Julian Croft, suddenly demanded answers. While the lawsuit was making headlines, the ICA Ethics Committee completed its Protocol 37 investigation. The board convened a hearing to review the findings. Julian Croft arrived with his legal team, looking confident that they could still salvage the situation by discrediting me. The board chair, however, did not share his confidence. "We have completed our audit of the complaints filed by Midwest Manufacturing," the chair began. "We found that the allegations against Edward Vance are completely unfounded. The standards were developed through a transparent, peer-reviewed process, and Mr. Vance recused himself from all decisions regarding Midwest. Beyond that, our investigation into the claims of documentation sabotage revealed a very different story." The chair projected a slide showing the file logs of Midwest Network. The records showed that when I resigned, I had uploaded 347 pages of technical documentation and 126 instructional videos. However, 2 days after my departure, Donald Croft had moved those files into a hidden archive directory on the company's server and claimed they were missing. He had deliberately hidden the training materials to create a false narrative of sabotage. "The board has referred these findings to the Federal Oversight Commission for potential regulatory fraud," the chair concluded. Julian Croft sat frozen in his chair, his face pale and eyes wide. Donald Croft looked down at the table, unable to meet anyone's gaze. Their attempt to destroy my career had completely collapsed. But the final phase of my plan was just beginning, and they were about to face the true cost of their greed. 3 days after the ethics hearing, Evelyn Miller arrived at my office at the ICA. She did not have her usual corporate confidence. She looked tired, her shoulders slumped, and she was carrying a thick folder of financial documents. "Edward," she said quietly, closing the door behind her. "We need to talk. The board of directors has authorized me to negotiate a settlement. Our stock has dropped 60%, and Eastbrook has officially terminated their agreement. We are facing liquidation by the end of the next quarter if we cannot resolve this patent lawsuit and get our certification back. 400 people on the production floor will lose their jobs." I looked at the woman who had helped Julian Croft deny my compensation requests for years. "I am listening, Evelyn," I said. "We are prepared to offer you full public acknowledgement of your invention," she said, sliding a document across my desk. "We will rename the calibration system the Vance Calibration Method. We will pay you $500,000 in back pay, representing the raises you should have received over the last 7 years. And we will pay you a licensing fee for the use of the patent." "This isn't just about money, Evelyn," I replied. "The patent assignment was forged. That is a federal crime. If I settle this lawsuit, I need to know that the people responsible are held accountable." "The board has already placed Julian and Donald on administrative leave," she admitted. "The internal investigation confirmed that Julian authorized the forgery 5 years ago, and Donald helped hide the file. The board is prepared to terminate their contracts permanently and refer the matter to the state prosecutor. We will cooperate fully with the criminal investigation." I studied the settlement proposal. I did not want the technicians and junior engineers to lose their jobs because of Julian's greed. They had worked hard and deserved to earn a living. But I also wanted to ensure that this could never happen again. "I will agree to a settlement under 3 conditions," I said. "First, Julian and Donald Croft must be permanently removed from all operations and ownership. Second, Midwest must immediately adopt the ICA's new voluntary attribution framework, which requires companies to register and verify the intellectual contributions of all their technical staff. Third, Midwest will pay a 5% royalty on all machines manufactured using my calibration technology, with the funds managed by an independent trust to support engineering scholarships for working-class students. Evelyn nodded slowly. The board will accept those terms, she said. They have no other choice. It is that or bankruptcy. The agreement was signed 2 weeks later. The news of the settlement sent shockwaves through the manufacturing sector. Midwest Manufacturing became the first major company to adopt the ICA's voluntary attribution standards. The public registry was updated, acknowledging my name as the sole inventor of the calibration rig and listing 17 other technical innovations I had developed during my 7 years at the company. More importantly, the registry also listed the names of 26 other engineers and technicians at Midwest, whose contributions had previously been claimed as proprietary company methods. Julian Croft and Donald Croft were officially fired. The board hired a new CEO, a former head of engineering named Sarah Vance, who had no relation to me but shared my respect for technical precision. Julian faced criminal charges for forgery and fraud, ultimately agreeing to a plea deal that included a heavy fine and probation. Donald was barred from serving as an officer in any public manufacturing firm for 5 years. With the Crofts gone and the new standards implemented, Midwest's provisional certification was upgraded to full certification. Their stock price stabilized, and they managed to secure new contracts to replace the lost Eastbrook business. The company culture transformed. The new management introduced a transparent compensation system that rewarded technical staff based on their documented contributions to the company's products. George was promoted to lead calibration engineer, taking over my old department with a salary that was double what I had made. 6 months after the settlement, I was invited to present the final version of the ICA Attribution Framework at the International Standards Summit. Over 60% of the manufacturers in our sector had adopted the framework, realizing that ethical attribution was not just good policy, but good business. As I stood on the stage, concluding my presentation, I noticed a familiar face in the back row. It was Luis, my ex-boyfriend, who had recently joined a competing certification firm. He raised his hand during the question and answer session. "Mr. Vance," he said, using my formal title, "how do you respond to critics who say this level of regulation increases costs for businesses and slows down development?" I smiled, looking out at the room of industry leaders. "Innovation without attribution is simply appropriation," I said. "Companies that understand this attract the best talent. They build the most reliable products, and they deliver the best long-term returns to their investors. When you respect the people who create the technology, you build a foundation that lasts. This isn't about hindering corporate growth. It's about ensuring that excellence has a clear and undeniable voice." As the room erupted into applause, I looked at Clara, who was smiling at me from the side of the stage. We had built a life together, and now we had built a system that protected others from the exploitation I had faced. The revenge was never about destroying Midwest. The true revenge was in changing the industry so that what happened to me could never happen to anyone else. My work was complete, and the evidence spoke for itself. Thank you for listening to my story. If you believe that hard work and honest innovation deserve to be recognized, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Share your own experiences in the comments below. Let your work leave the kind of evidence that eventually tells its own story.